Thank you so much. Thanks to the organizers for having me, and thanks to all of you for coming. So we are going to talk a little bit about water. Are you ready? So I haven't heard a lot about water yet, so settle in. I'm really happy to present some work that we are doing in our group towards building continental scale machine learning models to predict water quality. Not quantity, but mostly water quality. And since we are using and producing a lot of data, we also work towards how to communicate those model results and the data that we are using. So that's why we are building this web portal that is associated to it. So just maybe some statistics and numbers that might be familiar to you, but maybe they are not. So if you want to build or you want to manage water in general, you need data. I think that's a known fact. What might be less known is that, for example, in the US, there's 250,000 streams. They exist. But only about 11,300 of them are monitored. So you get information about those streams, but it's a tiny fraction of all those streams. That's water quantity. In the water quality space, that looks even worse. So in Canada, we, for example, have 6,000 stations where we measure phosphorus, like a nutrient in the water. But so that looks quite a lot. It's like half of those stream flow gauge stations. But if we look at how much data are produced from those stations, it's on average 1.3 data point per year, per station. So that's not 365 values or something like in the stream flow world. It's 1.3 data points. And then it gets even worse, because if you're looking at those stations where they are located, they are obviously not equally distributed in space. They cluster, right? So we learned from this that observations are really sparse in time and in space here. But we want to know about the water quality everywhere in between as well, right? We want to know what's the quality of the water there as well. So we are building models for that to fill in those blanks in between, right? To make use of the observations that we have and then interpolate, basically. So since it's a room full of people that appreciate data, that create data, amazing data sets, I thought I'd focus my talk about which data are we actually using and in need of to build a reliable water quality model. Not only at one location, but on large domains. So let's go step by step through them. In the first place, we need meteorology. We need temperature, we need precipitation, things like that. We use gridded data sets for that. This is one that is on a 10-kilometer scale, and it is available hourly for about 4 decades. Besides climate, we also need other input data like geophysical basin properties, which means in our case something like topography. We need soil information, and we need land cover information. So we are using different kinds of data sets for that to fulfill those requests. And then we are coming to something that is not that easily available. That's the nutrients that are input to our landscape. And that can happen in different ways. One might be, for example, phosphorus is added as fertilizer, or phosphorus is added as livestock manure to the landscapes. These data sets don't exist. You might have them for a county scale or something like that, but since they don't exist, we are developing those data sets on continental scales in our group. This one is showing you some examples for the Canadian portion we are working on, but there exists, or we create data sets also for the US of the same quality, basically. So that's one other thing that we need. So we actually even have to produce those data sets for our models. And then another input that we need is stream flow. So we actually need water quantity. We need to know how much water is flowing through our basins. And that means if we want to model water quality at a certain location in space, we also need stream flow at exactly that location. But we already know, there's only 11,300 monitored in the US. So there's a lot of locations that we want to model that don't exist, actually. So we are building another model just to get stream flow at all those locations. So we do that. There's another set of inputs that we need to set up that model, train it, to get only one input for that water quality model. And then last but not least, obviously we need observations, right? We need those 1.3 data points per station. And that's a real mess. So there was no database where you could just go and download all of them like you do with Streamflow. It's really tough because people go out in the field and take one soil sample and then they store that on their lab computer, and then you have 10,000 people doing that, and the data are never collected anywhere. So DataStream came to the rescue, and they are collecting all those data from people, bringing them in a standardized format, and making those data available to everyone. So we basically go there. It's a really nice initiative. They have when I took this screenshot, they had 33 million data points in their database. It's probably more by now. And then we look for the data that we actually need. So in our case, we wanted to model phosphorus. So there's about, of those 33 million data points, it's about 300,000 that we have across those 6,000 locations. There is no more data available, at least not by DataStream. So we are using those observations to train our model against, right? So we are building a model for all those locations and then just see if we are able to model them. So this is where the witchcraft basically starts, right? We are building a model, so we are brewing a model together. So the ingredients for that soup is basically all the input data sets that we just talked about, the soil data, the land cover data, those observations, all of that gets thrown in a pot and then stirred for like a week or so, and out comes a model, which basically predicts those water quality estimates. So not only we are using all those data sets, on top of that we have all those massive continental scale data sets available, or we are producing them, we are also creating a bunch of results on a continental scale. So how do we communicate that? We can create one really beautiful figure for a publication, but that's it, right? So we thought of it would be really nice if people could just go somewhere and say well, I have that one watershed. I'm not interested in all of Canada. I'm interested in exactly one watershed, like my water quality there. So we created, or we are in the middle of creating an open data portal where you will be able to find all those inputs, but also all those outputs, and then this way we can also update it on the fly, right? Like if we get 1 year of more data, we can just update the results that are on the website. It would be really tough with that static one figure in the publication, right? So the portal that we are building is called Poseidon. It's live. It's available under poseidonhydro.net. You can find the input data sets there that we are generating, but also model outputs. How it looks like, basically you get a map, you get a lot of locations where we run the model, you can click on each of those points, and what you basically get there is the observations, like for example those orange dots, but then also everything filled in between those few data points that you had. You can also get more information. So for example, here you might learn the water quality at that location is really, really bad, but you can double click on that point and you could get information of why is it actually this bad. So in this case, it's like a stacked bar plot, like the top bars all are inputs to your system, and the green bars that point downwards is what crops take up from those nutrients. So what you want is to make all those upward trending bars smaller. So in this case, you would learn that you want to reduce that blue bars, right, which is in this case manure. So you want to work on how to handle your livestock manure in that watershed. It would not bring anything if you just build a new wastewater treatment plant, because the human portion of it is this purple tiny bar at the top. So if you would just work on your domestic waste, it would not have that much of an impact. So you would learn all that for specific locations across the continent. And with that, I'm done, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
All right, thank you so much, Julie. I think we're going to hold questions until the end and do group questions like we did in our sessions yesterday. We're going to go ahead and change over the slides now, but please note for the presenters, if you could, at the end, be available for questions. So don't leave just because you're done presenting. All right, so our next presenter is Gabriel Sine from the United States Geological Survey. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Erin, and thank you everyone for coming, and just session organizers for giving me the opportunity to visit Oaxaca. All right, great. Let's see. What did I do? Oh, it's good. Okay. So my name is Gabriel Sine with the USGS. I'm going to talk about how we use satellite data for operational evapotranspiration modeling that will be used for water budget analysis and drought monitoring. So this, like the other aspect of water quality, so we're going to talk about water quantity, water use. Another one maybe? Advance? The down button goes forward. That sounds good. Just acknowledging my collaborators, contributor from funding, from research to operations. This is the outline. I'm going to talk about what remote sensing ET. A lot of people be familiar with it, but some applications using a FuseNet, famine early warning system. Some of you may know about it. So this is my most important slide to tell my science story. Graphics credit to the NASA. So when you look at evapotranspiration, which is equivalent to water use, about 70% of terrestrial rainfall becomes ET, right? So that's from the water budget aspect of it. What interests me is the second one. 1 kilogram of grain, it requires roughly 1,000 kilograms of water. So from management point of view, that's what interests me. And how that happens, I'm a student of Wageningen a long time ago, and that's through the process of photosynthesis. If you look at the simplified equation, you got carbon dioxide and water combined gives you, carbohydrates and, oxygen. When you look at that equation, really, carbon dioxide and oxygen, they don't vary that much in space and time, right, around the world. So what varies is really water and the difference in water around space and time, that changes carbohydrates. So globally, when food security issue is, concerned, that's because of water availability. So they said in here, the fluxes in storage of water varies in space and time, and how we quantify that is the whole question. We use remote sensing, satellite data. So that's the benefit of satellite data. Previous speaker talked about data. So I'm going to promise remote sensing is going to be the solution. I'm just kidding, not for everything, but really provides a lot. Once we know that, water availability, ecological drought, food security can be analyzed. So satellite data is a great equalizer. Anywhere in the world, we use the same quality of data, whether we launch satellites or we're just user of satellite data. All right, next. So going to talk about some products that are available so we can quantify agrohydrology. And I'm highlighting this website. If you're not familiar with, you can access free data, open access data. This is a distribution of, for example, annual total rainfall from Terra Climate. So now I'm going to switch it to ET. So you can see the relationship, obviously rainfall in evapotranspiration. And now I'm showing you a particular period, NDVI, the normalized difference vegetation index. That just shows you, well, you need water, you need energy, and to get vegetation distribution. The one I highlighted in circles in oval shape, that's low NDVI, low vegetation. Now I'm going to show you how it looks in terms of temperature, land surface temperature. When vegetation density is low, surface temperature is high. So we're using this important parameter to estimate how much water is evaporating from the surface, because ET is about energy and water. A lot of ET means a lot of cooling. So surface cooling happens when you have evapotranspiration, and we use the land surface temperature data to estimate evapotranspiration. I said earlier, once we have ET, we can use it for a lot of parameter water budgets and irrigation, water use estimation, whether it's from groundwater, from surface water. An example of annual total water use in the US, using an energy balance method we use, is this. Once we have the data, we can summarize this by land cover data. Land cover data is also available from NASA, from USGS, many products. So once you have ET, this is, for example, a distribution of ET. As you would expect, open water uses the most water, and shrublands use the least water. It's obvious. But the first thing is to map the amount of water used every pixel so that you can summarize it by land cover. The same kind of methodology, but we are using, instead of Landsat, we're using for global applications, the fierce data, in this case, modest fierce. Now you can cover the whole world. This is annual total water use around the world. As you can imagine, where there is rainfall and vegetation in the tropics, there is more ET. Where there is less energy, you will have lesser ET in higher latitudes. So a little bit of basic ET modeling. If you're an agriculturalist, we separate ET into two components, the weather component and the limitation, the availability. So what you see in here is, well, what we call the Penman-Montes, when there is no limitation, that's the maximum ET. Anywhere in the world, the maximum ET per day is about 15 millimeter per day. Just that's how much energy we have. So the limitation is a fraction. So what makes this lower than the potential is really the moisture condition or the vegetation health or like environmental stress salinity. So where is remote sensing coming in here? Remote sensing coming in really to help us the limitations. So we combine a limitation from satellite data, like land surface temperature, and the weather data giving us the maximum possible ET. So we combine the two, we get actual ET. An example would be, when you, how about this would be an example. When you don't have any limitation moisture, the air temperature and surface temperature will be about the same. So ET fraction will be close to 1. And when land cover is more and more bare, you will have much larger land surface temperature because there is no evaporative cooling. So when you have a lot of water, good vegetation, evaporative cooling makes the land surface and the air temperature about the same. So no sensible heat, all energy is used for evapotranspiration. So we have a model, in the interest of time, I will skip, so we just combine the weather and the land surface temperature to estimate field scale or basin scale ET. So an example, which one to use? Should we use modest or fierce? This is kind of difference you see. It's all about the scale. So this is from Landsat, you can see the center pivot, and this is from modest. So the idea is the average of this large area will be about the same. It generally works out at the basin scale. So this is an example, just again, an application of remote-based land surface temperature. These are 1990s, 2000, 2010. As you can see in here, there's a lot of fallow lands. And what happened in here is there was an agreement with the city of Los Angeles. There was an agreement for water to be diverted from the Colorado River to the city. So in 2010, a lot of farmers did not plant. So there was no water use. So the water right was transferred from the farmers to the cities. So you can detect this kind of applications using satellite data. Some applications using the famine early warning system. This product is available globally. So this is, for example, annual total ET, but we do this every 10 days. And when in terms of anomaly space, you see where the droughts are happening. This is, for example, in 2022. But this data is available every day, every 10 days, 1 kilometer. You can go to this website from FuseNet. You can identify. I'm going to show you some examples in Central Asia. This is an example I presented to show at the Cerian workshop. I see Garrick and Jeff and Krishna here. So this is the same slides I showed. What you see in here is ET anomalies negative in here. The precipitation shows negative and NDVI negative. So these are independently measured quantities showing drought. So when all these different parameters shows it's below normal condition, that's where FuseNet says, okay, there is a drought alert, food security issue, and that goes into cascades into decision making for food intervention, food supply. All right, don't have much time, 1 minute per left. So once you have the data, you can do a water budget for a large basin, for example, in here at the river basin, South Daria. And you have precipitation is available now, it's gridded. You can see where the precipitation is in the mountains, right? And this is runoff, again, in the mountains where the precip is there. And look where the ET is. ET is mainly happening in the lowland areas where there is a lot of irrigation. So just satellite gives you, where the water is happening, the supply, and where is the water used. So once you have all this data, then you can do, for example, a monthly distribution. This is my last slide. Monthly distribution of this precipitation peaks in the spring season, but the ET peaks in May. So when you total this up, generally, the sum of runoff and the ET, they should generally add up to the precipitation. But you can see this, the monthly variability of the water budget components. So all this data is available pretty much online, and you can download and play it anywhere in the world. With that, this is where you can download data. Again, OpenET, just a plugin for OpenET. The different models are being compared in the US. For those of you who question how good the models are, models tend to perform very well in croplands. And this is my last takeaway points. If you want to use this data directly, it's good for drought monitoring purposes. For water budget application, you may require a bias correction, a one-time bias correction. I think with that, my time is over. I thank you.
Thank you so much, Gabriel. All right, we're going to get our slides switched up. And our third presenter for today is Harrison Kuli from University of Augsburg in Germany. So thank you so much. We're going to get our slides going.
Okay, good morning, everyone. I want to thank you so much for attending this session and also for the organizers for this opportunity to present. This is part of my PhD, which I just finished recently, and I am currently at the University of Augsburg working in the research group for climate resilience of human-made ecosystems. And today I want to present about big data and crop modeling approaches for maize yield, maize condition and yield assessment in Kenya. It's fine, it works. Yeah, so as you know, maize is a widely grown crop, and currently it's grown by more than 100 countries globally. And for sub-Saharan Africa, compared to other regions, the yield or productivity is still very low, as you can see from this map, which shows areas in the US and Europe and parts of Asia have much more production compared to sub-Saharan Africa, where we have dominantly yellow zones which represent low productivity. And this also is supported by this graph, which shows the trends in production. This is from the FAO data, and sub-Saharan Africa is one of the regions with very slow rate of production increase relative to other regions. And this is compounded by many constraints which vary from biotic and also abiotic stresses. So this is Kenya, where my study was based, and maize is one of the very important crop for food security in Kenya, and it is grown in approximately 49% of the arable lands. And these pictures just show different maize conditions in the region. On the left, it shows some fields which have sorry. Sorry for that. So, still moving. It's very sensitive. Okay. Okay. Yeah. So, it's still moving, so let me go to the methodology. it's very sensitive to. Okay, so let me just speak about the conditions. So maize is grown in a range of conditions, and in Kenya, it actually is grown in altitude range from 0 to 2,500 meters above the sea level, and with temperature and rainfall varying from 600 to 1,200. And yeah, on this map, on this figure on the left, it shows the long rain season, which was the focus of my study. And this season is mostly where maize production is conducted. So from sowing date, which varies from March up to around May, and then the maize production goes on, and harvest is around November. So for the long maturity cultivars, which was the focus of my study. And so I integrated remote sensing and crop modeling approaches, and in this remote sensing data, I used Sentinel data to characterize crop types in the study area using a random forest model, which I will not speak about it in detail, but the objective was to just get a maize mask where maize are particularly grown, and we had some accuracies assessments also conducted for the outputs. Also, we used data from the FAO water productivity open access portal, whereby we obtained different metrics about land surface phenology. So, and in this, we were interested more in the start of the season and also in the mid-season or the peak season. And also, we used Landsat data, and this is where I am coming to, where we obtained data from Landsat, and in particular, we used NDVI data to estimate probable sowing dates. So this is one of the information which is not readily available for crop modeling inputs. And so we estimated it from remote sensing data to see the potential of deriving it and using for running crop models. And so since all this data come with different spatial resolutions, we had to do resampling and also have a uniform gridded scale where we used to run the simulations. And to speak briefly about the DSAT is a process-based model which integrates different inputs management, weather, and also soil inputs to model plant, atmosphere, and also soil interactions robustly. And it is one of the models which has been widely tested in the tropical environments, and it has been found to have a very good accuracies. Yeah, so this is the study area. I will not speak in detail. It's 2 counties in Kenya which cumulatively contribute to around 30% of the maize production. And maize is dominantly produced across the different agroecological zones, which range from humid to semi-humid. Yeah, and so these are the results from our study, and as you can see, this map on the left shows the estimated sowing dates in 2018. And what is interesting is that in 2018, this was one of the years with good conditions, and as you can see, there was quite a range. There was an early sowing practice in the study area, so ranging in these decades, early decades, which range from March to around April. So this could have been contributed by the good sufficient weather conditions which led to early onset or early planting by most farmers. But in 2021, which we also assessed, the sowing came very late because of maybe the weather conditions, and as you can see, sowing went up to until around May in some regions, which also we had some interviews with farmers, and we found also that this was the case. Yeah, so this is one of the results which we obtained, and these two figures the upper figure is a scatter plot of maximum season leaf area index, which was simulated by the crop model, and we evaluated this using the WEPO maximum or peak season value, which was actually derived from remote sensing, and we found a very good correlation between what the model simulated vis-a-vis what was actually modeled from this WEPO data. And this was applicable for both years, showing the potential of remote sensing derived sowing date in actually characterizing leaf area index or the peak season for maize in this study area. And same was also applicable for production. So what you can see in the red rectangles show the correlation which we obtained by comparing the yield simulated from the remote sensing derived sowing date and the yield which was actually observed in the study area provided by the Ministry of Agriculture in Kenya. So we simulated other arbitrary dates. So we moved 30 days above the remote sensing estimated day, and we also came 30 days below the remote sensing estimated date to see how the correlations perform when we use some other arbitrary dates other than the one which we derived from remote sensing. And so across the years, we can see there were some good correlations across the sub-counties which we used for our evaluation. So you can see much more information from the link which I have just shared. So so this slide also shows that the yield comparison across the sub-counties where reported yield was actually provided showed good correspondence between what the DSAT model simulated vis-a-vis what was actually observed across the different sub-counties. Yeah, so I have one slide here. I will not talk about it. It is an ongoing work which we actually look at climate change impacts. So we are using climate modeling data and the representative concentration pathway scenarios. So because of interest of time, the takeaway message from this is that remote sensing data and crop modeling integration offers very good approaches for yield assessment and also condition assessment, especially in data scarce regions such as Kenya and Sub-Saharan Africa. And also these integration mechanisms can offer holistic approaches which can be used to assess conditions at spatial explicit scales, which can even be very much useful for decision making at lower or finer scales. And these results also could potentially be used to strengthen the climate change adaptation measures. And until that, these are my references, and thank you so much for your attention.
Thank you so much, and sorry about the technical issues there. All right, our next speaker up, and we're going to get our slides changed over, is Daniela Guerrero from Lebanese Institute of Agricultural Development, where she's a doctoral student. Thank you so much.
Okay, do you hear me well? Thanks for the introduction. So we will come back, as already Gabriels and I did, so we will come back to Central Asia, and there we will explore the dynamics of crop water consumption in the irrigated areas of the Aral Sea Basin. And as a background, irrigated agriculture already supports 30% of the global crop production, and but already consumes 90% of the water consumption. So in arid and semi-arid areas like Central Asia, which is a hotspot of climate change, irrigated agriculture expanded massively during the Soviet Union, mostly for cotton production. And this led to the Aral Sea disaster, where the rivers that fed the irrigation canals, the Amu Darya and the Sea Darya, dried up 90%. Yeah, again, I think. Okay. So with the RLC disaster, so 90% of the size of the lake shrunk, and this was in less than 50 years. This is the region that we are talking about. Sorry. But after the dissolution of the Soviet Union, the region started also massively to change from water-intensive cropping, like cotton, to less water-intensive crops as winter wheat. However, these changes in land use haven't been studied, and that's what we want to check to understand now. As I said, so our focus would be, in this case, the Amu Darya basin, because it's one of the main tributaries of the RLC. That used to be the fourth largest lake in the world. And we want to answer two main research questions. One is how these spatio-temporal dynamics of crop water consumption evolve in the region, and also what were the contributions of land use and climate changes for the evapotranspiration dynamics. For this, so we use yearly maps at 30-meter resolution of cropping practices during 33 years, from 1987 to 2019. And we map three main cropping practices. The wet season cropping, that is mostly winter wheat, the dry season cropping, that is mostly cotton, and double cropping. And with these yearly maps, we see here in the graph on the right-hand side, this is the trajectories of this is in million hectares in the x-axis, and this is the trajectories of the expansion and contraction of the land use. And as we have seen here, our idea is that with this increasing wet season cropping that the region experienced since 1990s, with the decrease in dry season cropping, but also with this increase in double cropping, that is when the fields are harvested twice per year, we wanted to understand if these changes translate in less water consumption for the region. That was our main hypothesis here. And for this, I'm glad that I had Dr. Gabriels and I before, because we use the ECBOB model to estimate crop water consumption, so actual evapotranspiration in the region. But we didn't use the global products already ready to be used, because our interest was using data sets or estimations of evapotranspiration before 2000, because we also wanted to understand the impact of the period of the dissolution. So that's why we mapped evapotranspiration using Landsat at 30-meter resolution. And as Gabriel and I had already exposed, this is a model that we can use to estimate agricultural crop water use at Landsat and pixel scale, and that combines meteorological data as well to estimate actual evapotranspiration. So with this modeling, what we estimate was like a yearly maps of evapotranspiration for the growing season, and this combination of crop evapotranspiration of crop water use for these 33 years, also combined with the maps of the cropping practices, we estimate crop water consumption by each of these practices across time. So this is one of the main results we found, is that you see here in this graph, this is the total overall crop water consumption in the region expressed in volume. So it's a total volume of evapotranspiration we had in the region. And the main highlight here is that even when we have difference in area in each of the crops, you see here the colors identify one of the crops, we overall see an increasing trend. So this increase is by at least 10%. So overall, we have an increase in crop water consumption despite the changes in land use. But also, if we see at pixel scale, this is at volume, but if we see a pixel scale, we see that despite, independent of the type of cropping that we are seeing, all of the pixel experience increasing trend of evapotranspiration. That also translates in higher evapotranspiration across time. But with these results, we also wanted to see the climate drivers, so what is also happening with the climate in the region. So for this, we divided the region in, so the Aral Sea Basin in 3 sections, and we estimated, or we see the trends in each of the climatic drivers we analyze. In this case, we check precipitation, maximum temperature, and atmospheric water demand represented by evapotranspiration reference. And what we see is that in all of the regions, we see increasing trends. And also that in the downstream region, we see even a higher rate of increase in evapotranspiration, or in this case, a higher rate of warming. So to assess the climate drivers, or the impacts of land use and climate change and variability over the land use, we implemented a decomposition analysis. So we wanted to decompose the total change in evapotranspiration in 2 factors, either climate change or land use change. And our main finding is that the region experienced at least an increase in close to 20% of crop water consumption, but this change should have been higher if we didn't have the effect of land use. So land use had a mitigating effect in the overall, potential effect of climate change. So, but we also wanted to check, so in this case, sorry to repeat, but in this case, so we see counterbalancing effect of land use, so a positive, we could say positive effect on land use. But then we wanted to see what happened in each of these 3 regions that we analyzed, the 3 sections of the basin. And if you can see in the right-hand side, upstream and midstream regions had a counterbalancing effect, so a mitigating effect of land use, that decreased the potential effect of climate change. But in the downstream regions, we don't see this counterbalancing effect. So we wanted to check. Why is this difference between the 3 regions. For this, we estimated the proportions of the structure, because for us, the different composition of the 3 cropping practices are the ones that are explaining these changes. Maybe it's too difficult to see it here, but what I want to highlight here is that the downstream region is the one that has the highest increase in wet season cropping, so one of the massive increase, but also was the one that has less dry season cropping decrease. And this is one of the reasons that we assume in this case is causing that the counterbalancing effect is not seen in the downstream areas. So as a summary, a higher overall crop water consumption is increasing, so we really have more crop water consumption than before, even these changes in land use. But also that land use changes could mitigate the rise of water consumption, but as I highlight here, land use planning is a tool to counterbalance climate change, but it's not really enough, because at the end, water saving are needed for to counterbalance climate change, because evapotranspiration will rise in the future and surface water availability will also soon decline. I think that's it. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Daniela. All right, and that leads us to, we're going to do questions at the end. We're going to leave some chunk of time at the end. That leads us to our last speaker of the session before we do our Q&A. And our last speaker is Dee Yang from the University of Florida. So this.
Hi everyone, welcome to the session, and I'll be happy to talk about harnessing different data sources beyond the between the NEONs and the other data sources about land use legacy effects on forest structures. And so I would love to introduce a highlight for today's presentation about the legacy of land use. So this is a very important terms for the long-term time series analysis. So the land use legacies is to represent the long-lasting impacts of the past human activities on the ecosystems. So on the left side of the slide, it's presenting like the land clearing events in the 1960s. And here we are showing that what is the forest structures or changes over the 50 or 60 timing years. So the land use change really like are changing the forest ecology or the forest landscape in the southeastern United States. So this is very like, the legacy effects are very crucial for predicting the future forest trajectories as well. And so we are representing several ways for really mapping out the forest structures, which is a very key indicators of the forest ecosystem health. So the forest structures we are using as a key like plant functional type, and it's a very important aspect include a canopy cover, tree size distribution, species composition, and also like a lot of like the deadwood abundance. So we are using the NEON sites in this study. And that brings out the research questions of how we actually do the past land uses changes. For example, including the agriculture changes, deforestation, urban expansion, and influence the present day of forest structures. And how do we quantify those? And I want to bring out the very important data source that from the USGS and also NASA called the Corona. So this is a very important data source with very high spatial resolution that is pre-Landsat. And so they used to be by satellite, but in recent years it's getting declassified. So it's open for research purposes. And so that will be like important resource for a lot of the remote sensing analysis pre-Landsat. So the earliest data that we can get from the Corona data is around 1960s through the 1980s. And the spatial resolution is about 2 meters. So that is providing us a very high like a view for what is happening before Landsat. And it's global scale. And so on the right corner is an example of the data that across like Africa in 1966. And the other high resolution data source that we are using for represent the forest structures is the NEON sites. And so the NEON really provide the, NEON has 2 different course. So the NEON has core sites and the gradient sites. It's around like 82 sites across the United States to provide a really long-term ecological networks around the United States. And also it has the airborne observing platform, which is AOP data, which really flying the high peakness every year. So it has been active since 2019. So we have the repeatedly like coverage data for multiple, like around 80 NEON sites across the United States. And the spatial resolution is around 1 meter. And at the same time, it really like providing the LiDAR and the hyperspectral data, as well as the like a high resolution imagery over the forest. So it really like providing us can bring valuable resources to bring the scale gap to like measure from the organisms to different scales. So here's our study site. It's one of the Smithsonian sites in the northeastern United States. And on the right corner, we can see the neon flag lines. So we really want to, because we choose the sites because it has a very rich land use history and has a very transitioning from a mix of agriculture, private, and military use of a lot of different land use purposes, and right now it's in a different landscape mosaics. And so here we are developing AI algorithms to mapping the land use of the corona images. We call that the dual input. So it's really based on the CNN, but it combining with the DEM and also with the historical imagery. So the reason that we use the CNN on the historical land use is because it's based on RGB, and it doesn't have a lot of multispectral information, so we really need a deep learning on the historical land use reconstruction. So here I'm pointing out the workflow. So on the first structure side, we use neon sites on combining the different LiDAR and hyperspectral data and how to calculate the Simpson index and the Shannon index. And so the Simpson index is a great representation for the biodiversity. It's basically like you are picking out two random species and the probability of how those random species are the same. So those are the neon size calculation for Simpson index. And so here are some variables that we use to calculate the neon biodiversities. So we basically separate them to hyperspectral and the LiDAR variables. So we also use the CNN on this. And to really quantify how the land use or how the land use effects on the biodiversity, we use the geospatial modeling called the GWR, the geography weight algorithms. So to really create a localized regression models to show the coefficient, how actually the intensive land use affecting the forest structure, especially the Shannon index. So here are the results for the Shannon index with a 1 meter spatial resolution. And so we can see the top variables are canopy height, a slope, and some hyperspectral spectral variations. And here are the input of our GWR for land use legacy effects. And on the top, we are creating the land use change trajectory from 1965 to 1980s. And we are also plotting the Shannon index on the current site, and the slope and the DEM. So one point that I want to point out, we also combine the historical information from TopoView. That is a historical data source in the USGS. And so here is the results that how to showing the land use effects on the Shannon index. And so we can see that the impact of the land use, so this is a land use, thank you. So this is a picture of showing the land use as a dummy variable, and on Shannon index shows a significant spatial variation. So, and on the left corner is showing that indicating the land use changes have very positive effects on biodiversity in a lot of the regions. And this is one part of our study area with 1 meter spatial resolution. And so we can also find a lot of hotspots and to really to show how the land use legacy effects changing the forest structures on the current state. And so we are gonna classify more land use effects later on and plot based on agricultures or urban expansions, etc. And the takeaway message is we use the GWR to invest the spatial relationship between the land use trajectory and the biodiversity. And analysis really harness different land use data, especially the corona data from historical and the neon sites. And so our results show that the land use effect on biodiversity really varies on different scales. And you can see that from our large results. And based on the findings, we suggest region-specific land use policies, especially when we are trying to increase the spatial resolution, we can really see a lot of different details. Thank you so much. Be happy to take questions.
All right, thank you, Dee. All right, thank you first off to all of our speakers for taking the time. And I know we did things a little differently by holding the questions to the end, but given technology issues, we wanted to make sure everybody's talks could go through. So we do have 15 to 20-ish minutes for questions, and we have microphones, and all of our speakers are kind of close up in the front up here. So we can pass out the microphones and get a Q&A started. So any questions from the audience?
Hi, I have a question for the Arrow Lakes presentation. I was surprised that you didn't talk about soil salinization as a type of factor for changing land use. And it's very important in the your downstream section, not so much in the upstream section, but even in the middle there's salinization issues. What are your thoughts on that?
Yes, you're right. We haven't really. So in our case, the only focus we had is on land use. So only the land use change, but not the soil state. But I would say still the region, the downstream region, is still one of the. So the area is one of the massively irrigated regions. So even the extent of the cropping patterns remains the same. But still, I would say that in those cases, evapotranspiration in the irrigated lands would still be affected more for the climate drivers than for the soil equality.
But to combat salinization, they have to irrigate more to push that salt layer down below the root zone. So, I mean, there's kind of a hidden factor in here that is very important since you want to get at evapotranspiration. It's actually quite critical. You've convolved a couple of different things that are going to make it difficult to come up with any kind of management prescriptions. But go for it.
Yeah, thanks.
All right, next questions.
Just to add to what you said, from ET point of view, you're right. The ET may not capture the what they call it leaching requirements to push it down. So assumption is that water is not lost. It's not consumptive use. It goes into the groundwater. It's still available for pumping. So really, what ET does is consumptive use. That's not available for some other use. In terms of the land surface temperature capturing, if there is a salinity and there is a stress, the land surface temperature, the plants are not going to transpire as much. So that will be captured. So any reduced evapotranspiration will be captured by the ET model, by the land surface temperature. I think the leaching requirement is assumption it goes to the groundwater. It will be available for future use. It's not lost.
All right, we have another question over here.
I have a question, Harrison. I loved seeing DSAT again. I used that torturing myself during my PhD, and I know how much work it takes to run a DSAT model. And I'm wondering this keeps going off. In terms of the use of Landsat data to derive the start of the growing season, did you have a threshold value, or how exactly? I was just interested in how you actually determined that date from the Landsat data itself. Just what criteria?
Yeah, so To highlight on this, we used Landsat data, but also we had a baseline, which is the WEPO data. So for the WEPO data, they have this start of the season value. So this is the time that already the crops have started to grow, and they have kind of, somebody was presenting yesterday about harmonics. So this start of the season is like the stage where the greening is starting to take effect. And so we went back from that start of the season and analyze fitted an harmonic function and see the temporal profile before the start of the season to estimate a probable day where we have this lowest value. So to highlight in the area, normally farmers do land preparations early, but there is a lag, or there is a time between land preparations and the actual sowing. So in some fields, there is an expectation that already some weeds or some plants might have started growing, which can be captured by a satellite. But before the actual sowing, there is also harrowing. So this is a standard practice. So after plowing, they also have to do harrowing, and harrowing comes immediately before the planting. So the presence of these minor peaks and also the low value before the start of the season could help us to identify a probable sowing date. But of course, I can say it's not very accurate, but it is an estimated value.
Thanks, Harrison.
All right, next question. Any other questions? All right, thank you again so much for coming. Our speakers are up in the front if anybody wants to have conversations with them. And thank you so much for coming to our series of sessions. This is the last one of our 3. And we've had some great talks, and we've enjoyed meeting you all and hearing all about your really interesting work over the last day and a half. So thank you again.